Hello, everybody. I'm super excited for what we have in store today. I have the author of this book. It's called The Primordial Code, Brian Costello. Guys, so this book right here, I have been going to sleep reading, and I was reading 30 to 100 pages a day of this book, and super exciting night times I've been looking forward to. I was actually like looking forward to going to sleep every single night because I got to be immersed in this story. This is a story that it makes you really desire that this place exists for real. You're just like, can this place actually exist? All right, so we got him. We got his full
Yeah.
face.
Okay,
Brian, yeah.
sorry, it took me a second there.
Yeah, super happy to see you. How's it going?
It's going well, man. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction.
Yeah, so as I was telling people, like I was going to bed just like excited to get immersed in the story. And I'm super curious about a lot of things with this book. First of all, people, it's long. You sent it to me because we're friends a few months ago, and I straight up told you, like, dude, I don't usually read stories or fiction books. I've got like literally bookshelves of other books that need to be read first. And a couple weeks ago, I was just like kind of tired of the nonfiction, and I was like, let me go check out this book. And I was like, I wasn't sure of it. And after like the first chapter, I was absolutely hooked because I think that this is a story that everyone needs to read. It's literally the world that should be. It's kind of like the place that should be. I'm not even certain if it's actually fiction. Like I'm like, did he actually visit this place or what? But yeah, I'll leave it there. Let's start off with
Yeah,
like how this story came to you and what inspired you to actually write this book.
yeah. Thanks. That's a good place to start with the kind of nonfiction, fiction talk. I sent it to some other friends too, or like a lot of people in my network. They had picked up a copy to be supportive and whatnot. And if you check out the Amazon reviews, is a lot of people are saying the same thing. They're like, I'm not usually a fiction type of person. People from our world that are mostly into just always educating themselves in their own personal development tend to lean towards nonfiction. And but the consensus is pretty much the same, that the fiction aspect of it gives it something different, and so it allows. I think it creates a little bit more of an opening for people to receive things that are challenging, things that may challenge our belief systems, because it's not so much like right at you. It's kind of like through the characters, and they can sort of piece some things together themselves and feel a little bit less maybe attacked if there's a challenging topic that kind of flies in their face. And it also, just like you said, it engages differently. If I actually saw someone last night, and someone that I just kind of know locally, and he's like, "Oh, I've been checking out your book. I'm about halfway through," and he said the same thing. He's like, I'm learning a lot, but it's also cool because I want to know what happens next. I want to like see what happens in the story too. So he said something along the lines of, killing two birds with one stone sort of thing. Um, and it's funny though, because I don't read a lot of fiction. I read very, very little fiction myself. But a few years ago, I had a book title in my mind and kind of a book concept in my mind for many years, and if you remember towards the end, there's an introduction for another book that was written. One of the characters finds this book on the bookshelf during the story. That was actually the book I was going to write, and it's called "It All Starts." It all starts within,
Mm-hmm.
accessing your intuition and inner wisdom in the age of information. That was like the book I was going to write, and I sat on it for years and just couldn't really get like excited enough about it to really follow through. But once I saw in my mind the idea of a fiction story and wrapping it into something more engaging, then it sort of took off and became something exciting for me. And then from that point on, it just happened on its own.
And so how like where did the idea come from? Like do you channel it? Like where does the story come from?
It's funny that you say channel, because my wife is convinced that I channel it. I have a little bit of hesitancy using that term. I don't consider myself someone that channels necessarily, but I think we all have the ability to receive um, if we really know how to open ourselves up properly. And I don't think I really knew how to open myself up very well for most of my life. And keep it very long story short, throughout my 20s, I was go, 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 go all the time. I was a CrossFit athlete as well. I competed in another event at a very high level. I was traveling the world. I had a business that I just wanted to make better, better, better every day. And it was all yang, basically. You know, if for those that are familiar, which I know many are, it's that yang, 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 go, 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 don't stop, don't stop. Kind of hyper toxic masculinity, hyper shadowy masculine energy. And lo and behold, the wheels fell off, everything kind of unraveled, and I was forced to swing back into balance. And then I started through after a lot of pain and suffering, I started finding my way more into the yin side of things, where I was able to open myself up and receive. I did a very long fast. I did a 30-day fast. I did a 100-something day sun gazing protocol, and I was just spending I dedicated time in my life, like a period of time in my life. It's like I just have to kind of rebuild myself, and I started opening myself up to all different sorts of things. A lot of things that I was always following you very closely. I know we had similar journeys with the CrossFit side of things and whatnot, and I always was keen to what you were talking about, and just kind of keeping that mentality of like maybe everything I've thought up to this point is, or should be challenged or questioned. So to answer your question, I started opening myself up, literally and figuratively. And then the more I opened, the more I received. And the more I trusted what I was receiving, the more it came in. And I started just journaling a lot. Like this entire book is basically from my journal, just little nuggets of wisdom that I've collected over the years and then just expanded into a story.
So you own a CrossFit gym, right?
Yes. Yes.
So did I, if you
Yep.
guys aren't
Mm-hmm.
familiar with that. And so both of us have kind of went deep into health and wellness and fitness. Like you just heard him say yang, and then eventually like the pendulum swings back and you rebalance everything. And so it's interesting because almost everything in the book you could tell was like a lesson for people if it's the first time, or for me it was like just so gratifying to hear uh it in a story, because it like puts it in the context of why it's important, and you're wrapping it around like the life of the characters, and you kind of see a land or a people that have been living in integrity and harmony with nature, which you call the primordial code, and just how that looks within a story, because you can't really get that in reality. Like it has to be a
Mm-hmm.
fiction story.
Yes.
But before we go into more nuts and bolts, could you give like a summary of the story without having to give away the whole entire book, but
Yeah.
just so that people are listening kind of know what we're talking about?
Yeah. So essentially, like Rob mentioned, the story takes place mostly on this island in this secret nation known as Okablaya, and Okablaya is the Lakota word for freedom. And as they talk about in the story, it's like true, real, no budging on it, freedom. Um, and they live in peace and prosperity and harmony and happiness. And it's not a utopia. They make that clear. It's not like everything is just this magical, fantasy. They have their challenges and their conflicts, but it's essentially a version of a world that I think is possible, and kind of want the readers to also believe is possible. It's the attempt is to be proof of that. And this nation, they're watching what's going on in the Western world. They're obviously seeing where we're headed in our trajectory, and they feel like they've decided they need to get involved and try to help. And they don't want to blow their cover. They are a secret nation. So they start this underground project where they bring regular Americans over, and they teach them, and they give them, they have mentors and teachers and classes, and they learn their traditions and their value systems and their principles. And then the idea is that they go back, and they're kind of like undercover spiritual warriors, more or less, back here in the States, or in any Western society.
And I really like the characters, the main characters, Garrett and I don't know how to pronounce her name because she corrects everybody on
Yeah,
how to pronounce her name.
it's
Is
Sandra. It's like,
Sandra.
people call her Sandra, but Sandra. That's, there's more coming on with that, why that's part of it. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh yeah. There's more books, right? I mean, I
oh yeah,
see like at least two more books in this series. Guys, the reason why
yes.
I'm having Brian on here is because I literally feel like this book will go wild. Like it's going to be one of the books that everyone has on their bookshelf. Like I really see big things with this book, and I'm super excited for like I was thinking because the book was so long it was going to all wrap up at the end, but it's just beginning.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I don't tell people that ahead of time, but it's really kind of like one long introduction to the next book. But I think, like you would agree, there's enough valuable content in there that it's worth its own read.
yeah. And the storyline is so in depth in some points that it literally feels like a memory. Like it reads like I'm listening to somebody. I mean, you literally are listening to the characters. Like it's kind of like written like almost like a reality show where you're going through it with the character, but it really does feel like you, the author, are remembering this.
Hmm.
And I'm like, I have this like desire of wishing that that were true. And then I realized like you're putting on the paper, you're casting out this version of reality, and it really is up to us all to latch on to that and harmonize to it so that like this actual reality
Hmm.
does exist for us each
Hmm.
individually. And so that journey was really cool of like going from like, oh man, shucks, why isn't this how everything is, and then just being like, well, wait a minute, it kind of is like that for those who choose
Hmm.
to really go with the code.
Yeah, that's a really great point, and yeah, I basically the idea wasn't that I know exactly how we need to do everything, and everybody listen to me. I have the answers. That was, I'm just trying to not come across that way at all, but I was trying to offer up an example of what I do think is possible. I really wanted to make sure that everything that was covered in the story was something that I think is possible in this lifetime, really. Just the way people are interacting and living. And, some of it is definitely we need a lot of work and come together on things to accomplish. But I really wanted to not get into like too much like of a fantasy idea, because I think when it gets into fantasy, then it gets a little bit blurry of how much people can really take in as practical knowledge that we can apply. So the idea was that it was like this realistic fiction that we could all, like you said, if it goes wild, like, I kind of want something people can rally around. I always thought of it as something that we could rally around as a potential example.
So there was I just want to actually say everything, but I'm not gonna say everything. But there is a lot of emphasis on the health of the
Yes.
human being, like our not just physical, but like the totality, the holistic health, and the food that we're consuming and how that food's grown. And we'll get into housing in a little bit, but let's just stay on the topic of like agriculture and the food supply, like your own personal opinions, because it was obviously a very important aspect of the book, but your own personal opinions, like what's going on with the food supply that somebody who may be still in the matrix or empirical code, like still like within the boundaries of the news and the classical entertainment system, what do they need to know that's important in regards to the food that we're consuming?
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a lot obviously on that. I think one of like where I would start is, I think a simple point that was showcased in the book was just this the low the geography of our food and how far removed it is from its original state by the time it reaches our plate. And even when we're making healthier choices, anything that's packaged or boxed or shipped, and it touches many hands, it goes through so many different places, it sits on shelves, it has additives, even, but without even getting into the additives part, that's like kind of the obvious. But that process, even this healthy product, is now so far from removed from its original state, and it could include ingredients from all different parts of the world that are in different climates than you. They can, even the ingredients themselves can be from all different places, different than us. And I was trying to kind of, I've always brought in this idea that we are, as we're eating, especially locally or hopefully locally, we're gaining information about our environment through the food. If it's a lot of juicy, bright fruits, it's telling us that there's plenty of sunlight, plenty of water, rainfall, fertile soil, all those things. So our nervous system and our emotional sense can move into a more abundant, relaxed, and abundant state. Whereas when the quality of the ingredients drops or the types of food changes, we start to get into this scarcity mode. Like, there's a point in the book where he's talking about his bagel that he eats for the morning, and his body's saying, well, if this is the best food there is out there, then we're in deep shit, right? Like, and it gets us into like a high stress sort of state. So I think the ingredients and the processing stuff like is kind of obvious, but when we really think about just the geographical living in our actual habitat and getting the information we need from our food, that's a perspective that I think is important for people to get to understand.
Yeah, and it's super overlooked. We got a comment saying food in your latitude, which is kind of a cool way of looking at it. But the light that makes up our fruits and vegetables is like it's from the sun. And you're
Mm-hmm.
right, the sun's hitting, the spectrum is different all over the earth, and it may be confusing. And a lot of times people don't realize that until they start shedding off other layers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe
Exactly.
if you're going to the bar still and watching football for 8 hours on Sundays and like horror movies, maybe you don't really sense that. But as you start to shed a lot of the distractions in life, you really do feel the difference between uh, the farmer's market fruits and
Yes.
vegetables and the even organic food that you buy from the best grocery store still could be coming from far away. It still could be using questionable chemicals to be grown and shelf stable.
Yes.
Uh, I mean, when we buy stuff from the farmer's market, it barely lasts at all on our shelf.
Yeah.
And it's an inconvenience, but then you're like, well, if these nectarines are literally bad after a couple days, like what's in the nectarines that I buy that I
Yes.
buy at the grocery store?
Exactly. Yeah, and it's a good point too. Like, some people might be thinking, well, if I'm going out to the bars and watching football 8 hours a day, whatever, eating fast food, stuff like that, then jumping to like caring about eating a healthy product that has different ingredients from different places, like, yeah, that might seem sort of extreme and maybe not the next step. But the idea is more of a society of just getting a reframe on just what it would look like to what the idea of growing from food going from the ground to our plate should look like, or from a tree to our plate, or whatever it is. Like, just stepping back and taking a different kind of zooming out is a term I use, and something, a concept that I applied in this book quite often. So let's just zoom out instead of arguing over kind of the micro details. Let's zoom out for a second, take a look a bit at the big picture here, and see that there's probably some really backwards things happening at the
Yeah.
fundamental level.
Like, why are we not growing our food? I
Mm-hmm.
was telling my wife like a couple days ago, I was like, why don't all of the like we should design a neighborhood where all of the I even was telling her if we get land and we build like we do the plots and we plot everything out and everybody's houses have their food plants and trees out by the road because we have 10 avocado trees in our
Mm-hmm.
backyard. We have passion fruit. We've got these weird cucumber things. I don't even know what they're called. We got a lot of stuff in our backyard. And there's so much abundance of food that I almost wish that people could
You
come
just
just
come, you
pick
take it, yeah.
pick their own stuff. And if we all had different things, then the food's taken care of. But we know why that's not the case. It was all designed to make
Yeah,
it so we have to go to the store.
exactly. Are you familiar with the book series called The Ringing Cedars?
No, but I have them downloaded on my
Okay.
computer. I want it. You don't have, do you have physical copies of those
I
books?
do. I bought the box set.
Yeah. Cause I was like, oh, is it worth it to, I
I
was like,
haven't read them all. I've only read the first three, but yeah.
yeah, I did see that you referenced that very subtly in the book, and I was excited for that.
Yeah, and the part what you were just saying about everyone having their own plot of land that is kind of self-sustaining. It's mentioned in that book also. They call it like a king's dominion, where everyone has like 2.2 acres, and it's like that's your family land forever. Like you're working that land and nurturing it, not just for you and your immediate needs, for generations and generations and generations to come. So that concept was interesting, and there was other influences of the ring cedars in the Primordial Code. The scene where he's holding the seeds underneath his tongue and planting them, and that's kind of borrowed. Some of that is borrowed from the first book of that series.
You know, the that I mean that's also like very indigenous knowledge as well. It's basically the first liquid that the seed touches, right?
Yeah.
Being your own saliva, and eventually, like even walking barefoot, gardening with your hands, urine, sweat going in there and coating the plants. But I was down in Mexico. Was it Mexico? Mexico, and talking to like a Mayan guy who's like Mayan lineage. And he was saying that what they would spill on the seeds first would be blood of
Mm,
some of their animals, like chicken blood.
mm,
And then it eventually evolved to like actual human
mm.
blood. But on the walls, you just see like human sacrifices. And I think that there's like another part of the story of ancient history that like might have gotten embellished of like chopping the heads off and sacrificing humans when it was
Yeah.
really just spilling blood on the agriculture.
I've always had that suspicion as well because it seems like almost like a line of empirical code, where people are just automatically like, well, they did human sacrifice, so let's just dismiss everything about them because of this one thing, and not obviously if that's true, it's a big thing, and I just also have this sense that there's more to that story as well.
Like, cause like the winners of some of the game, it was like if you won this championship, you die. You get to like be like detach from this reality and go back to the heavens, which even that sounds like it could be a cool rite of passage, but it also could be like the people that were the grandest version of a human being and won the championship was the ones that the new crops were encoded from.
Hmm.
Like they were the blood of them
I
goes
see.
into the the wheat and the fruit so
Hmm.
that everybody gets that genetic potential. Anyways, that's
Ah.
just my brain going off and being like, there's some missing gaps here that, like, looking at the news and how much they lie to us, like, history has to be way off, like, way off center.
Yeah, I think it's a safe assumption that there's, if that's the kind of primary narrative, that there's more to it, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So, is the second book coming out? When's it coming out?
It's gonna be a while. um, so
I hope
if I'm being completely honest, I have a general idea. I mean, I have a big picture idea of where the book's going to go in the story. I have not started doing any really hard creation yet. I really promised myself that I only would when this book was proving, when people are really starting to rally around it, and I'm getting enough confirmation that when the second book releases, a lot of people are going to be anxiously waiting for it, and it's trending in that direction, of course. Um, but it's only been a few months since this one's published, so it's it's gaining steam.
and this is your first book, right?
Yes.
So if somebody's got something inside of them that they know that there's a gnosis that needs to go into a book, what sort of advice would you give that person?
So I mean, the easy advice is like, oh, just go for it, just do it. But that's like kind of lame. But obviously, yes, that. But more because I think that that's basically like this idea in our mind eventually becomes like its own energy and almost like its own entity inside of us, and it starts like wanting to like rip itself free and out. And the more we try to keep it in, the more, inner conflict there's going to be, essentially. And that's pretty much what happened to me. I was just in my mind and going and going. And I got to the point of like, if I don't do this, my life is going to start like, it wasn't like, oh, if I do this book, my whole life is going to get better. It's like, if I don't do this, my life is going to start probably getting worse, because I'm going to be dealing with feeling like I'm not being the best version of myself, and I'm not answering my true calling, and I'm ignoring the signs from above that this is what's meant to happen next in my life. So another thing I used to tell myself when I was getting started that's helpful for people is like, I would walk into libraries and bookstores and stuff, and I'd just be like, there have literally been like millions of books that have been written, and most of them probably aren't really that good. I mean, we know about the good ones. I mean, some of them, they're probably all better than even the ones we don't know. I shouldn't be so quick to judge. But the point is, I pretty much told myself that I'm definitely confident enough that I won't write the worst book that's ever been written, right? So like, that might sound silly, but like, if all these other people were willing to step up and write a book and put themselves out there and get it published, and a lot of them probably aren't very good at all. And then I watch a lot of the stuff that's on TV sometimes in movies, and I'm just like, this is horrendous. The writing, the scripting, even the acting. I'm like, and people, these are professionals that do this. And I'm only getting negative on them because it just gave me a little bit more confidence of like, it's not going to be that bad. And if that was kind of all I needed to like get myself to actually do it. And I'm guessing there's a lot of people that would probably find that reframe kind of helpful. Basically, I was like, what if I write a book that sucks? What's the worst thing that happened? I wrote a book that sucks. It's not really that big of a deal,
And how long did you work on it?
It took about 2 years from first sentence to publication. There were some decent sized gaps in there. I actually wrote the first 2 chapters and published them. I don't know why that just happened.
Wait, I lost your sound.
Yeah, my sound. Am I here now?
Yeah, you're here now.
Okay. I made a hand gesture and it like threw off the thing. How long did it?
Oh
yeah, I wrote the first 2 chapters and then published those actually as audio. I recorded them as a podcast and published them for free, which are still available for people to find to preview for free. And I kind of viewed that as its own
project. Where do people find that?
So if Apple, Spotify, any podcast, just type the Primordial Code. And you'll find it.
The first 2 chapters on Audible on a podcast.
Yes. Audio for free. Yes.
All right. Sorry to interrupt you. I just want to make sure.
No, that's really important. I would love for people to start there. And I viewed that. I didn't really look past the first 2 chapters. I didn't know what was going to happen next. I just wanted to write these chapters, put them out, get a feel, get some feedback, see if people were digging the story. And they were. So I was like, all right. I wanted to write it anyway, but I just needed a little bit of validation before I kept pouring my heart and soul into it, that people were going to actually read it. And then I wrote the next 12 chapters in the next year. It was basically a year for the first 2 and a year for the next 12.
The first 2 were amazing, though. It was like, it was amazing.
Well, it was kind of its own separate store. It almost had its own like opening and closing, like individual story in there.
Yeah. Can we say the frame of the book, like how the chapter?
Yeah,
so guys, the book's super cool because it's written from the perspective of 2 different characters, and every other chapter is like, the first chapter is Garrett, the second chapter is Sandra, and then the third chapter goes back to Garrett, and they're kind of like going through day by day, like over the course of a week, and you're seeing like their 2 perspectives as they're going through this journey separately. They kind of interact every once in a while, but you see 2 different perspectives of the same journey, which is cool.
Yeah, that was if it's cool to hit on that for a second. It wasn't my original idea. I originally was just going to write this male character, a male in his 30s. Just seemed like an easy character for me to write, and started realizing that all of the topics and things I wanted to bring into discussion just wouldn't really make sense for this one character to have all of these interactions. It would have just kind of been a little unrealistic and forced. So I decided a second character was an idea and realized, I guess it should be female. which I had to work through a lot of resistance around writing a female character. Um, but it opened up a whole different, opened up a lot more opportunities to have these different topics come up and things. And to also really bring in that balance of the masculine and feminine. They're kind of each going through their own journey of kind of, tapping into that, what it means to be that, step into that divine masculine and feminine power from where they are to where they're going.
Yeah, I mean, it sounded like, or it felt like you did a good job writing the female character. I wonder how females feel if you're on the mark for that. Um,
So far, I've gotten pretty good feedback
okay,
about it. A
cool.
few of them were like, "Did you write this all yourself?" Like, especially there's parts where about like self-image and stuff when she's looking in the mirror and things. And um, like I had a friend recently who was like, "This seemed like, how do you know this?" I'm like, "Well, it's kind of in our culture, right?" I try to stick with things that are just common in our culture. I'm pretty happy with the way it came out. There were some spots where I struggled.
So there's a lot to do with like culture design or yeah, I'll just say that, like designing how a culture, like there's context between how Okablaya, if I'm saying that right,
Mm-hmm.
is designed versus regular humanity, like classic governments and
Mm-hmm.
things about how our societies are designed. And like when you think about waving a magic wand, like to everybody here in this reality, can you see like what path would take people from where they are now to there? Like, do you have, like, have you thought of that? Have you wondered that? Like, and do you have answers for what that would be, like what that bridge looks like?
I think about it a lot, obviously, in the creation of this. And I was thinking about it a lot for years, which is part of what led me to writing it. And I'll be honest, there's some days where I just think it's impossible. I don't think we can get there without like a major catastrophic, collapse of society that before we rebuild. And this is mentioned quickly in the story as well, where it's like the forest fire analogy, where like we just all needs to burn down before it can regrow. And I'll be honest, there are times when it's hard to imagine such a transformation without something like that first. And I am very hopeful, but also very faithful that we can do it without that. Um, do I have an instructions guide on how to do it? I mean, this book is kind of my best attempt, but it's also, like I said, it's me not saying this is what we need to do, step one, step two, step three kind of thing. It's more about just like, shifting the perspective. But I think some of the main topics that were hit, education, like the fundamental layers is where it really needs to start. Childhood education, but even there's some talk about taxes and government and things, and just the idea of that a society in which people can just take things from you and make laws that force you to do things you don't want to do or prevent you from doing things you want to do that are not harmful to other people. That is conflict. And if we aim to live in peace, which I hope we do, although I've never really heard anyone say that that's the goal. I was thinking about that recently. No one ever says that this is the goal, although I would imagine it should be.
The goal is
Um,
profit.
yes, well, I know. So maybe we could just start by setting the proper goal that we should, the goal should be peace. But if that is the goal, peace and conflict can't coexist. It's one or the other. They're two separate things, So if the foundational layers, conflict, and people can take things from you, specifically money that you would use for things like food and shelter. It's like in the wild, if any animal, if you're getting in the way of their food or their shelter, they're in fight or flight. They're in attack mode. They are not happy with the people trying to take those things. If we want peace and we'd have to really get clear on agreeing essentially that we want peace and we want to work to peace, and we'd have to remove systems that conflict that are really built on conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And just to be clear, I think most people get this, but I don't mean that there's no different conflict as in differences of opinions, right? Like that's a different kind of conflict. I mean, like people can't just overpower you and take things from you because they make the rules.
And you even touched on that in the book of like how the parent and child interact and they have conversations about things, and even like sadness and how the child is taught how to deal with that, which is a
Mhm.
conflict in the system, right?
Exactly.
And letting it work through.
Exactly. Yeah, that kind of conflict is actually what we need more of. Really, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
healthy, because even the American characters get uncomfortable a lot with these conversations because they're like confronting and there's differences in opinions. But the Acablo people are just like, no, this is how we talk. You know, we're going to sit and talk through until we, you know, get our points across. And there's no, we're not, we don't like you any more or less based on these conversations.
Yeah. My magic wand answer is if people were empathically connected to other people, like if there was somehow a way that I could feel the energy of another person, like if they're
Mm,
happy, I'm happy. Like if they're sad,
mm,
I'm sad. Then that would almost uh, force is a strong word, but it would force us to be concerned with the peace and prosperity of other people. And I feel that that is possible for us to be so
yes.
energetically open that we can feel the emotions of other people.
Right.
Um, that's a whole other thing of like how we teach fitness and our diet and even religion and prayer and
Hmm.
meditation and breath. All of that sorts of goes into our ability to be connected with the earth and other people. But I really feel like that's foundational in this new paradigm of reality. We need
Yeah.
the connection with self to be open and
Yes.
flowing, and then
Yes.
that'll unlock the connection to other people. Which
Yeah.
is, I'm going to get back to you, but that's like why I formed my professional life around health and wellness, meditation, breath, even diet. So, what sort of things are you doing outside of uh, author? Like, what sort of things are you doing to help facilitate this vision?
Yeah. So basically, starting to take the first steps with the kind of what I consider the next stage of this project, which isn't the actual next book, but there's more to it. But I really was kind of waiting a little bit to see how people react and see what kind of came naturally. Um, but what I'd already been spending a lot of time in, and so basically, I figured people are going to finish wanting to learn more about like the movement and physical side of things that are discussed, the medicine and healing side, specifically with like plant medicines, and the actual community side of things, which is like how to actually come together and create this. I kind of assume that people would be looking for more on those three things. So, and those are all things that I'm now kind of stepping into more officially, things I've been doing on the side. Both, I'm kind of developing my own, I shouldn't say my own, it's influenced by several other modalities, but my own movement practice that coincides really well with actually with plant medicine because of the way it leads you towards these kind of primordial positions of our original design. So I'm helping people both on the physical side there and then prepare to do more deeper healing with, it doesn't have to be with plant medicines, but it's where I've been putting a lot of my time and focus and feel like is a really powerful way to help people. So, and it helps with what you just said there, with kind of the energetic side of things for people to get to understand their own, really connect with their intuition and connect with themselves so then they can actually connect with others. Just like, period, actually connect with others, period. Right.
Do you have an example you can share with us, like of any technique that you do that you can share?
Yeah. So I'll give you a quick scenario, quick, like, you know, overview. So I did learn, I just quick plug. I learned a lot from this methodology called GOTA movement systems. And they basically pinpointed a map. So at one point of the book, you'll hear there's this coach called, his name is Puma, and he's talking about, he has this one scene where he's saying, if you look at a pride of lions, they all move exactly the same. If you look at this species or animal, they all move exactly the same. And how every species essentially has a proper way of moving. And the go to team was the first to introduce me to the idea that so do humans, which now makes a lot of sense. But it's not just, oh, we move like this, we move our arms and legs like this. It's actually, how does energy and pressure load and transfer. And that's like when you see lions move, you see this certain kind of loading pattern, and you notice that everything moves in spirals and waves, just like the rest of nature. And then specifically, if you track, certain key markers on the human, it becomes this kind of infinity symbol of the spiral. And it's the DNA. It's spiral, a wave this way and a wave this way, and it kind of creates this infinity symbol. So when I started hearing this, I was like, "Whoa, this is like I had to chase this." And medicine, while in ceremonial spaces, I was able to like really crack it open in a way, because once I had a little bit of a map, I realized that the medicine's trying to lead me to these same positions and to these same patterns and these same sequences. So I just kept following, and then working on my own practice. But I always start people on the ground, to answer your question, and the ground creates the actual grounding pressure, and the relationship with the floor. Essentially, you could be same person, same ground, but the angles of your body will dictate the pressure and whether or not it's loading and opening and decompressing, or kind of collapsing and compressing, based on the angles and positions. So we always start people on the ground, working on our basically, which is like almost like a adult fetal position, and kind of bringing everything into this kind of packed ball, including our feet. So you see like baby's feet. It's kind of hard to do right where I'm at right at the moment, but this point will make sense, I think. We start by root. The way I teach it is that we get the root secure first, and we activate this security system that comes in from having a secure root. And once that security system is engaged, the spine can decompress and open, so the heart space, we can kind of lift and open that chest. But the lifting of the chest comes from the secure root first, and then the crown can float tall. So we talk about root, crown, heart relationship or alignment. And when we can root, all this opens and expands wide. The crown lifts tall, so we can move. And then we're in a decompressed position, so these spirals and waves can come back naturally. That's like the short version of it. But what happens is, when we start to adopt these new positions, the way we're perceiving the world from a place of safety, open expansion, and higher perspective, we're literally seeing a different world now. And the world is responding to you differently as well, right? Your energy shifts and changes. Instead of closed in, kind of cut off energy circulation, we're open and expansive, and we're grounded. So we're not flying around, overpowering people. It's a very grounded, gentle power. And like I said, just between that, and I've been doing pretty consistent plant medicine work for the last 6 years, and the discovery, realizing the overlap and how much the medicine wants to take us there, and we can allow, and that dance is now what I'm helping people with the most, with something called primordial medicine, actually, is what it's called. And we're doing retreats and things like that. So I kind of forget what the original question was. I hope I didn't get too far off tangent.
I do too. No, I asked for an example of.
Oh, that's right. I tried to summarize. It's tough to just.
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap with that, and even my perspective and Human Garage's perspective of how the body works, and even like the spirals is a big thing, and then also like breaking the body apart into three components that work together, and they all have a different reason for existing. And even just the number 3 within there, weaved throughout, like the philosophy is also similar.
I've been I started following Gary a long time ago, back when like Human Garage was first coming onto the scene, and been following you guys for a long time. So I'm really familiar with what you do, and I love it.
Yeah. So is there anything unanswered to you, like that you ponder on, like a question that maybe even you brought up in the book that you're hoping to solve in your subconscious? We could get deep with Brian here. And guys, if
Yeah,
you're
I
just
mean, you.
joining us, Brian wrote the Primordial Code. If you're just joining us live, and we're talking about the beauty of these 660 something pages, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I heard about that. So if you want to crack open a question that I wrestle with, the thing that I wrestle with in my own journey that I can't seem to quite pin the answer to, this might seem like left field. I don't really know, but is whether or not humans are um, naturally predators, or if we are predators by nature, or is purely a learned behavior. And I've thought about this a lot, so I don't know if it's something you want to crack open and get into a little bit, but
I actually was noticing, because I'm similar, of my uh the touchy subject of eating animals versus not eating animals. And I was like wondering where the stance was of the book, and I noticed that it was sort of like I do. I just kind of leave it out for other people to
mm-hmm,
interpret what they would like to interpret, and then also just talk about the benefits of plants
mm-hmm.
and the beauty of fruit. So yeah, it's like religion and politics, though, right? Like
I know. So
I'm
I'm
feeling
fine.
hesitancy going into this, but I would
I,
say,
I was going to say though, real quickly, the angle that I'm thinking of it from is purely observational, like observation of nature.
yeah,
No religion, politics,
that's
or
exactly where I
ethics
was going to
involved.
go.
Yeah.
Is when you look into the forest, you see carnage, you see fighting over territory, you also see a lot of harmony, but you do see things eating other things. And there's this realness of it. You know, I hate horror movies, but I do follow an account on Instagram that's just about animals eating other animals. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't do it for like the gore. It's just like the realness of, like, you see the fight and you also see the acceptance of the dying animal as it's being consumed. And it's something that we're not really taught anything about growing up. And so there's that nature component. And then there's also, if you look into our own bodies, you see cells destroying and eating other
Mm-hmm.
cells. You see wars being conducted. Like, there's a lot of stuff happening inside of our own body that is similar to this nature. And there is like a higher perspective that I have, that I take, where I really don't know the answer. Like, I'm like you. I have been studying diet for decades, and I can honestly say that I do not know the best way for a human to eat, whether it's like carnivore, paleo, vegetarian,
Mm-hmm.
vegan, like just like one of the main modalities. But I do find myself, like you from the book, going into more of the intention of how this food like came to me
Mm-hmm.
and where it came from. And I feel like I resonate more with that. And knowingly, like from a vegan standpoint, I'm participating in the murder of, or the death, I should say. Murder is like a human thing, but the death of animals. And I know that, and I don't have that resolved on whether that's necessary or not. So I actually like that you brought that up, because it's also a question I struggle with after studying diet for
Yeah.
decades.
I've kind of pinned it down to one, I think, thing. It's basically like, so because people will tell you, of course, we're hunters. Learning how to use tools and hunt is what caused our brains to grow and caused this kind of evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And then my response to that is that, well, we really need to examine that timeline, because we have a lot of things in history, a lot of things being found and known about now that could very well be, I don't know if proving the timeline false, but definitely bringing in that there could have been other timelines. That might not be such an accurate timeline, and it could almost twist it around to like, maybe that's when we started to decline, actually.
Right.
So like I said, we won't keep going into it, but that's just kind of where I come to, and I keep myself very open. I read all different. I'm not one way or the other. I personally don't eat much meat, very 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 little, but I'm like willing to be convinced. I just haven't been yet.
I mean, I've went vegan and raw vegan many different times in my life for up to years at a time. And I will say that out of a lot of my research, there's overwhelming amounts of information and stories of like this higher ascended version of us
Yes.
not eating animals.
Yes.
And so it's not us though. It's like the immortal people
Yeah.
or the even like extraterrestrial or other dimensional like fourth density beings that live inside the earth. Like there's like it's like this other version of us that's not us. And it seems like at that stage animals aren't being consumed.
Mm.
And so the reach there is like, well, if I want to be more like that, then I cut out animals now. And even that is like I see the logic there, and I've been there, and I've desired that. But also, it's still a question. It's like,
Yeah.
are we that ascended version, or are we here trapped
Exactly.
within time and space as we are as third density
It,
humans
yes. In
for
a
a reason? Like,
physical reality. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And the density, because density, a lot of people teach eat a lot of density, nutrient dense foods and stuff, which like makes sense. And it's like, well, maybe we don't want to be so dense. Maybe we want to be less dense. But I guess and I'll end it on this because I know we don't want to go too far. But basically, I ask myself when I think about Okobly and I think about creating a society like this, I ask myself, can a society like this exist running on, with a human population whose guts are filled with flesh and blood of other animals? Just because of the connection that we would need to have and the ability to read each other's energy and to be less dense. And then that's kind of like where I'm at and wrestling with it. I can't say one way or the other.
mhm. Yeah. The do you like you have kids?
Three.
How are you? This is like another deep topic. How are you personally educating them? Like, is it in alignment with the book? Like, what were your choices on that?
Well, they're very young, but yeah, basically, yeah. I'm doing my best to live by these I'm doing my best to put what my best principles into this story and then live by those principles. Um, you know, Obviously the characters, I have a lot of time to think about what they're saying and things. And if you saw me at bedtime trying to get three kids to bed and they're, giving me a hard time, I'm not going to sound as quite as stoic and, kingly as some of these parents in here. But yeah, we try to emulate it as best we can. We are still kind of finding the right fit for them educationally. We were living nomadically for a few years. We were down in Costa Rica and things, and um, we're essentially homeschooling. My oldest is only 6, so we're still kind of early on. My youngest is only 6 months. Um, so, but now it's kind of like for the last few years, like, no, we're gonna like figure out exactly how we want to do this, and now it's like, all right, we still really haven't figured it out. But yeah, our idea is to educate them in alignment with what we believe is true, even if they're coming home from school, which has already happened a little bit, with like learning things that we don't necessarily believe are true. It's been a little tricky. It hasn't happened too much, but I can see it. I can see it starting to happen more. So we're trying to figure that out.
Yeah, that's another question I have. I imagine homeschooling um, when I have kids that are at that age, but also that's like a question. I don't know.
Yeah.
I was talking to this very wealthy guy who's very conscious, and his answer to that was he can afford going to private school. He can afford the best schooling and even private tutors. He sends his kids to public schools so that they understand society. And
Hmm.
they go into it with the notion that this is what the masses
Hmm.
are being taught. And we're teaching you how it really is, but it gives them context of like what everybody else is dealing with.
Yeah. That's interesting. So they're almost there to like observe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I also wonder while you're thinking, like, we could do everything right for our kids and then they just go in the completely opposite direction. It's like I
Yeah.
feel like because I went to public schools and was malnourished and had parents that had me when they were young and, weren't like 100% mentors for me. They're more like disciplinarians, like
Yeah.
don't do
Okay.
this, don't do that. Because of all of that, I'm interested in the other side. So it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
what what do we do? Like, because they could go the opposite direction.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We're seeing patterns of that already too. Of like even some resistance forming around these practices and things. But I will say, so like the school scene when they go and she observes the school. Really, what I wrote there is what I'm hoping we can create here in some way, shape, or form, whether it's us directly or our community. And if you remember, the main intention of the school was for them to discover who they really are. I have an objection to teaching kindergartners things like astrophysics, like about solar system, when they have to like imagine light years, where they don't know what it means to, you use the words 3 days from now, and they don't know what that means. They don't have concepts of time, and we're teaching them things that require us to imagine light years. And 65 million years ago, this happened, and all things where they just have to say, "Okay, I believe you." It's to me that alone, whether those things are true or not, isn't the point. It's that this is the wrong way to be teaching kids who are 5 years old, where they're learning informational facts. It sets the tone right off the bat for just not how we learn. And actually, to go back to your original question about like bridging society, like we talked about, that was as we were talking and you were answering, that kind of came up to me as maybe a better answer. It was more of like that we think information, we're in the information age and we keep thinking more and more information is what's going to be how we're going to find our way. There's some new information is going to come out or whatever to be able to prove what's right and prove how we do things. And I think what we're observing is the exact opposite, how we're just getting more and more lost and confused. And what we want to shift back to is that the answers we need are not outside of us, they're inside of us. And that alone, again, if you could like whittle it down to one thing, I think that's it. Like kids learn right away. You have the answers, not the teacher, not the books. It's like you have the answers. There's other things to learn that you can learn other ways, but the real answers that you need in your life and that we need as a society are right already inside.
So we mentioned earlier you own gyms and I own gyms as well. And what I started realizing at the end of my like 10-year gym career was that the less I would teach, the more that they would gain
Mm,
from the experience. Even though I'm like a phenomenal teacher, it was like restructuring my language in a way that wasn't so much like top down, like parent, child, teacher, student, guru, disciple. It was
mm-hmm,
like,
mm-hmm.
can we as a group learn from everybody? So it
Yeah.
wasn't this authoritative thing. It was, and I think that the thing that in this book, the Primordial Code, that you bring up so beautifully is like the concept of play and
Mm,
how children learn the most through playing. And even when I think back of my childhood, like school was just this thing that I hated that I had to do. And like I never read, and in college I didn't even buy textbooks. And um but I love learning. It was just like
yeah.
now as an adult, since I got out of college, like I've read more, I've researched more than I ever did
Yes.
in all of school. So, and it was almost like this voracious drive to actually learn what's real, because everything that was taught to me was like taught in such a boring
Mm-hmm.
way, and stuff that is either unimportant or outright completely opposite of what matters.
Yeah.
So yeah, something's off in the school system,
Yes.
and we get to figure that out as a society as well.
Yeah.
But it's the foundation, like you said, the goal of schooling, if you go back to the foundation of like who actually created it, is to produce first soldiers that listen to orders, and then now it's to produce corporate employees
Yeah.
that are like tuned into going to work for 9 hours a day, asking for a bathroom break,
Yeah.
getting a half hour for lunch. Like all of that is just part of the program.
Yeah.
And when you teach somebody that from 3 or 4 years old, another concept in the book that you go over awesomely is like when somebody's so young, they don't know to question the thing, and it
Yeah.
just becomes reality for them. And that's what the real purpose of modern day school system is to produce employees and
Yeah.
soldiers.
Right. So that's all normal, but it's just normalizing. Something I talk about with children all the time is essentially all they're ever doing is normalizing what they see and they're a part of. Like that's how they're learning. They're just, if mom and dad fight and yell at each other all the time, okay, that's normal. That's what mom and dads do. If you go somewhere and you can't talk, you have to sit at your desk, you can't, that's normal. That's what life is, right? So they're just normalizing, and I think the school system is, whether it's intentional or not, is helping them normalize behaviors that aren't beneficial, aren't congruent with their long-term growth and development and happiness.
On that, what do you think about sports?
Oh, this is a tricky one for us. We're getting here now because my kids are getting towards sports. And it's one I'm stuck on too, because there's so much beauty in sports and competition in the right ways and teamwork and all these things and just sacrificing discipline and learning new skills and pushing yourself. And there's so much like toxicity around it as well, regarding just like overly competitive at young age. Kids have to like pick their sport by the time they're 5 years old, like whatever. So I'll start by saying I've been stuck on this as well. I think, like most things, saying sports themselves are the problem is probably not correct, because I think there can be so much to gain from understanding competition and putting yourself in the arena, so to speak. I grew up as a wrestler, and what it takes to step out on the mat by yourself, just you and the opponent, no one else is there you win, it's on you, you lose, it's on you. There's something to that really molded and shaped me. And I want to find ways to instill those values in my kids, or for them to discover those values, I should say, in themselves, and create an environment for that to happen without getting swept into the overly competitive, win at all costs, take the fun out of it. Um, you're a failure if you lose, all that kind of stuff. Right. So I'm sure there's a way. It's one area where I do feel really confident that no matter what other people are doing, we can work together to create, as a parental relationship, ways to make that happen. But I don't have like a real solid plan.
Yeah. I mean, I love questions. That's why I'm bringing it up. And
Yeah,
it's
no,
great.
it's a great question.
Like, guys, I personally feel that answers kill the benefit of the question. Like, if you have a question, contemplate on it. And that's where the value of the question is. Like, soon as you like school teaches us, there's only one right answer to the question, and you link them together, it destroys the benefit of the question.
Exactly.
And like contemplation is like a whole entire like arm or leg of like Eastern philosophy. It's like being present and observing what's going on with life. Yeah, sports is a tricky one for me as well. And primarily because of what we were just talking about, programming. Like, I grew up playing hockey since I was 3 years old, and that was law for me. Like,
Yeah.
be better than other people was like the way the world worked.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until after I was 30 years old that I started realizing that, like, I started detaching from that and
Yeah.
realizing that that's not the purpose. And then I think back of my coaches, like the most wisest coaches, or the people that I know, like friends that were in martial arts, if they had like a very wise elder coach, the way that the elders teach sports is completely different than like the macho guy who's like, go win at any cost and sit down and shut up. Like, the elder coaches have like the sport is the lesson for self sort
Yes.
of philosophy. And I think that that's where sports can be mostly beneficial, when it's a practice of self.
Yes. Great point.
All right. So, do you have anything else to say about the Primordial Code, the book, for instance? So I just want to reiterate, guys, if you would like the first 2 chapters for free, just Google the Primordial Code and you'll find a podcast.
Yeah, it's on Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
All right. And you get the first 2 chapters for free. And then I would also encourage everyone, because I realize that I haven't done this is like go write a review on Amazon when you're done to help Brian out. Because like I said, this book is important. I think it'll shift the planet's consciousness. So I'll go write that review right after we're done with
Cool.
this. But do you
Thanks.
have anything else to add for
Uh,
takeaways?
no, I don't think so. I jotted a note down before. We didn't end up hitting it. I forget exactly what happened, but you said something about remembering. And I was meeting with a friend recently who just finished the book, and we were talking about like if you had to summarize the book in one sentence or one word. And when we were talking about the word, that was the word that came back was remembering. And the idea, it's just kind of to hit a theme of the book or concept, is that like, you know, I think this process of us, of any of the next evolution of humanity and any kind of forward progress from here is really going to be more about remembering who we really are inside than discovering something new and different. Um, so I think if that like sounds interesting to you, and that sounds like a topic and a mindset that you'd like to explore more while challenging yourself along the way in many ways, and hopefully finding the story enjoyable too, then I do feel really confident that you will get a lot out of this story. It's yeah, I'm yeah, I'm getting to a place. People like you, especially, thank you for your wonderful feedback. They're really helping me say that with more confidence. But I really do, and I'd be honored to have people check it out.
And where can people buy it if they wanted to jump right to that?
So right now it's just on Amazon.
Okay. The
Um,
Primordial Code.
yep, exactly, and you can check
Well,
out the reviews and stuff too if you're a little unsure.
I'm honored to actually know you and to be able to just reach out to you and say like, bro, this book is amazing. Let's actually have a conversation. Like I'm honored to, and I feel like I cherish this relationship because we were able to have this conversation. And I hope that everybody listening to this got something out of it. I'm trusting that people got something out of it, and they'll get even more when they jump into this book. It seems long, but it went by quick, guys. I think I was done in like 10 days or something reading the whole book. It goes by because you're excited to read it.
Cool, thanks. And if Rob, if I could say one thing quick, I just wanted to show my appreciation for you as well over the years. Like I mentioned, we've interacted a few times, but I've always been kind of from afar, watching your evolution and just your ability to step in front of the camera and talk and speak and share, which I've struggled with tremendously. I'm getting better, but just and the topics that you were willing to explore and discover, or go into that a lot of other people would be too afraid to, gave me a lot of confidence to do my own exploration, and a lot of that stuff is now in this story. So you played a role in some ways.
Yeah, I'm so happy to hear that. Thank you for sharing. And
Sure.
guys, like my intention is that this book goes out and like literally because you wrote this, Brian, it's going to shift reality. It is, right? Like you saw two different paths. You're like, I write the book or I don't write the book. Well, I choose the reality where I write the book. And so now we all get to live in that reality.
Yeah.
I'm super excited for that.
Sick. Thank you
So
so much.
with that, thank you guys for the comments and thank you for your audience. And
Yeah.
Brian, thanks for being here.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you guys. And one last thing, just if you're on, feel free to give me a follow and let me know that you came in from the show. And I could maybe raffle off a couple signed copies or something like that to any new followers who come in.
Oh, that would be cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Not maybe. I will. I don't know how many or whatnot, but I will. I just kind of thought of it as we were getting started before.
Cool. Yeah, guys. All right. Take care.
Thanks a
Bye-bye.
lot, Ra. See ya.